So, as many of you know, Diane and I just moved into a house north of Vandalia. Several of you helped us move in. We unloaded that truck on a Saturday morning with all of our possessions, and some of those boxes and the furniture was pretty heavy. And thanks again for all of your help. Well, Diane and I are pretty much done with unloading all of those boxes, and yes, they were really heavy. I found that if I was in a hurry and did not bend my knees and lift with my center, my core, my back would start to ache. So I needed to be careful how I lifted with my core so that I would be careful of myself and careful of Diane so she wouldn't have to do all the work. That same lifting from our core can also apply to our life of faith. We need to remember our core beliefs, our trust in our ever-present, ever-patient, and loving God, to be centered and focused on God, and thus not tempted to harshly judge either ourselves or criticize others when we face our own turmoils or disagreements. Do we respond to others out of anger, frustration, desire for revenge? Or do we instead look for direction from our core, Father in heaven, Jesus Christ, Holy Spirit? Jesus Christ is my core. I hope Jesus Christ is your core as well. His gospel, his words are my guide on how I treat myself and hopefully how I respond to others. Now, we've all heard of that phrase, give it to God. If faced with an opposing view on a social or political issue, I want my response to look towards God, to give it to God, and let God help me find the answers and the appeals that I need, rather than just hastily respond on social media or give in to that temptation to think my own politics or worldview are the only way to think. Our Old Testament reading from Jeremiah finds the prophet realizing he is being threatened by enemies that are trying to kill him. But rather than lash out at those around him, his appeal is to God. Now, Jeremiah was written in an age of turmoil, just a little more serious than what's going on in our world today. You see, because in ancient Judea, there was lots of competing ideas and factions arguing as to what should be the appropriate response to the imminent threat of exile. And the real possibility that the Israelites were going to be completely wiped out by enemies. So for Jeremiah, he knew that God was with him. He knew where his core faith resided. So despite that threat of being led to slaughter, Jeremiah turns not to fight, but to God. He appeals to our God of righteousness, appeals to our God who tries the heart and mind of ourselves and those that we are in contention with. May we be like Jeremiah, and instead of publicly lashing out at others who we perceive as threatening us, let us remember to lift from our core and take it to God instead. In Psalm 54, the psalmist is also appealing to God instead of directly attacking what many translations have as, in our reading, was strangers, but it's usually translated as insolent ones. Now, my dictionary defines insolent as arrogant, lack of respect. And when I read or listen to what's going on politically in this country, I see a whole lot of insolence, a whole lot of arrogance and lack of respect on all sides. Polite political disagreement has morphed into these personal attacks. And too many believe that we as a person are the ones who are being attacked. How do we respond? We could emotionally, reactively, bitterly respond, or we can take it to God, our true core. So as the psalmist realizes, God is our helper, the one who upholds our life. It is through our trust in God that God will respond to our enemies. For God is the one who delivers us from all of our troubles. So rather than lashing out or judging the other, let the Psalms be our guide and take it to God. God can take care and deal with all of our anger, our frustrations, our complaints. God can take it all. So let us remember to lift from our core and take it to God instead. In our gospel reading today, once again, we are reading about these poor disciples and their inability to understand what Jesus is talking about, even as he's talking about something pretty important, that he says he is going to be killed and after 3 days rise again. But the disciples, in this case, they are so busy fighting amongst themselves as to who is the greatest that they fail to understand what Jesus is talking about. I don't know about you, but I know at times my thoughts have been so consumed by what someone has done to me or about to do to me that I fail to listen to somebody's really important advice. So perhaps the disciples do not understand Jesus because they're too busy worried about themselves. What is revealed here is that the disciples' core has not yet truly been grounded in that trust, in that core of who Jesus is, who Jesus will become. And Jesus then reminds his disciples one of his core teachings: whoever wants to be first must be last of all, servant of all. If Christ is our core, you and I need to remember that to be a servant of all is our way, that we do treat all others. So rather than take our frustrations out on one another, live with your core. Take it to God instead. And then finally, in our New Testament reading, James does not shy from getting to the heart of the matter. And so let me repeat what Don read as far as in James chapter 3, just a couple of the verses. But if you have bitter envy and selfish ambition in your heart, do not be boastful and false to the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, devilish. For where there is envy and selfish ambition, there will also be disorder and wickedness of every kind. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without a trace of partiality or hypocrisy. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace for those who make peace. What James is saying here is that where there's that envy and that selfish ambition, there is bound to be conflict. But if we put our trust in the wisdom from above, God, then we become peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, and full of mercy. And the advice James is giving here is just as much about how we treat ourselves as how we treat others. So let us remember to live from our core and take it to God instead. The good news, The good news this morning, folks, is that we each have a God who loves us unconditionally. We have a God who has forgiven unconditionally all of our petty little selfish acts and our most hurtful sins. We have Jesus Christ, who knows what it is like to live in a world of humans lashing out at one another. And we have the Holy Spirit, who resides deep down in our very soul to help guide our reactions to the world around us. We have our core. We just need to remember to use our core. So how do you respond to your own self-criticism or the criticism that is of others or from others? Do you respond as so much of the secular world responds for your own self-critic? Do you let the world around you determine who you are? Or do you remember to lift from your core, trust, take it to God in prayer, trusting that our ever-patient God can take whatever we throw at him. God will listen and respond as only God can, with unconditional love and acceptance. And what if you read something on social media, hear it from your favorite news anchor, or watch something on TV that really riles you up? How do you respond? Let us not forget our core faith, our trust in an all-loving, ever-present God. Let us reach deep down to our very core, where the Holy Spirit dwells, and choose to use our core to take our frustrations and our anger to God instead. Let us choose that path of patience and appeals to God, to lift up